Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Workday Chats today. For this special session on the practical AI and ML use cases you can deploy within your finance function to both protect and create value. I'm Terrance Wampler. I'm the Group General Manager for our OCFO Solutions, and I'm your host for this LinkedIn Live. Today, I'm super thrilled to be joined by Nitin Mittal, Global AI Strategy Leader at Deloitte and co-author along with Tom Davenport of the best-selling business book, All In on AI, How Smart Companies Win Big with Artificial Intelligence. Now, Nitin is also a lecturer at the MIT SMR Connection Series, Data and Disruption, Mastering AI for ML for Finance, sponsored by Workday. Hey, Nitin, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's super hard to find time on your schedule given how hot the AI topic is, and we really appreciate the partnership we have with Deloitte, especially around helping CFOs and their finance teams modernize for the future. All right, before we dive into this topic of AI-fueled finance, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Deloitte?
No, absolutely. And Terrance, thank you for having me here. As you kind of mentioned in the context of my title, what I actually kind of focus on is charting the AI journey for Deloitte as a company and the clients of Deloitte. And it's kind of in that role, I get the privilege of working with the alliance partners, wherein we're able to kind of progress on a common cause for almost all the Fortune 1000 companies in the world.
Wow, you're like the sailor charting our way. That's awesome. Or maybe an astronaut. All right. So earlier in 2023, you and Tom Davenport published All In on AI, and this is a bestseller on artificial intelligence. Can you tell me about why you did this and what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have actually been in the field of data analytics and AI for a good 2 decades. And when you're kind of in that field for about 2 decades, you actually build a lot of experience. You end up working with a lot of organizations. And I have not only found myself advising, but also implementing the underlying systems. And what kind of frankly led to this book is where Tom and I got together in terms of how could we actually codify all that experience. It's good to talk about it one-on-one or with a client, 2 clients, or 3 clients, but can we make it available to everyone? And the whole purpose of the book was to actually kind of share some of the thinking, lessons learned, approaches, and what we ourselves had been learning from organizations wherein they are charting their own path to be all in on AI and ultimately become an AI-fueled organization. That was kind of the essence of it. And I like this. What we have found through a lot of the work is that many of them are just getting started. Now, generative AI has given them wings. The book specifically says that only 1% of the organizations have gone on the path of trying to become AI-fueled. That is accelerating, and many more organizations, since we wrote the book, have actually now started following suit and looking at productionalizing generative AI in particular and going beyond experimentation, exploration, and initial proof of concept development.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a great book. I've recommended it to all of our product managers here to read and understand how finance can take a journey here. So great job. It's really impressive. You were a lecturer with Tom in the MIT SMR Connection Series, Data and Disruption, Mastering AI for ML. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys talk about in that series and lessons that people can take away from it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tom actually focused on the business case. The business case behind becoming an AI-fueled organization. What does it mean? And how should enterprises think of it? And what I sort of complemented Tom's ideas and kind of perspectives is how could you actually apply that in the area of finance? How do you think about it? How do you proceed? And ultimately, what could be the form and function of future of finance that is enabled by AI and machine learning in a very practical way? That was kind of the essence of the lecture that both Tom and I kind of helped deliver at MIT SMR.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that practicality because you've given us some deliverables here, some presentations that I think are amazing. And we both kind of have a view of there's protect value and there's grow value within the finance function. And so we kind of both look at it like we can protect value by doing hyper automation of compliance tasks and mitigating risk. And we can grow value by figuring out opportunities to have insights and signals from data. So what are some of these examples like that you've worked through and places where people can start looking at this?
Yeah, here's kind of the picture that I would paint, Terrance. It is really important to understand what is happening in the current context, specifically with the further progression of AI and now the advent of generative AI. Generative AI in particular is not just about technology. Generative AI at the end of the day is starting to mimic human cognitive function. The ability to write, the ability to speak or converse, the ability to create images, the ability to even kind of infer and judge, those are human cognitive functions that are being mimicked by generative AI. What that means is that we are seeing right in front of our eyes the birth of a digital workforce. A digital workforce that can work along with, as a co-pilot, with a human workforce. What does that do? That essentially enables, if you think of it in the context of finance, it enables a much more dynamic environment in the field of finance. It enables continuous monitoring and continuous assessment and evaluation of all the financial transactions in real time so that you could ultimately go towards what is called a zero-day close. That is the
Awesome.
essence of where we want to move. But you have to do it in a practical sense. You have to do it in a practical sense. And this is kind of what I also talked about in my lecture at MIT, which is when you have essentially an environment with humans working with a digital workforce in finance, you can start thinking of a virtual collections agent, a automated reconciliation digital avatar, or a digital controller that all become part and parcel of this digital workforce, working with a human workforce in finance, moving towards zero-day close and enabling future of finance fueled by AI. And that is the beauty of where Workday can actually kind of proceed and what you and I have been talking of.
Yeah, I know you've been coaching us up really well on that. And some of those examples are amazing. One of the comments I'll make, and I'll ask you a little bit ad hoc here, which is it is about collaboration. It's not about replacement, right? It's about upskilling. And how do you see that happening in a finance function? How do you prepare for that a little bit?
We perhaps need to get away from this notion that it is replacement. It's not replacement. It's augmentation. And it's augmentation partly through reskilling, partly through embracing kind of this digital workforce. No different, by the way, where when the iPhone was introduced back in 2007, we went from initial, or at least organizations went from initial trepidation to it becoming ubiquitous. It becoming ubiquitous where it is part and parcel of our life right now. And we don't think too much about it. It's become our daily kind of way of accessing information, undertaking work, conducting sort of, let's say, all kinds of activities, and also the primary means of communication. It is a kind of a device that is ubiquitous as part of both our personal and work life. AI and all the manifestations of it is going to be exactly the same. So when we think of it in the finance context, first and foremost, I think everyone would need to understand what is the concept of generative AI and AI at large. How is it creating a digital workforce? How do you work with that digital workforce? And then when we talk of augmentation, what can the digital workforce do versus what we should actually be focused on, wherein we are focused on a higher order level of tasks, focused on creativity, focused on insights, focused on bringing experience to bear, focused on judging, and focus on making business decisions, not necessarily the grunt work that has to be done in the context of understanding every single financial transactional flow and how the close has to take place and what has to be kind of reconciled, etc. Because that can be taken over by a digital workforce. And that's what, frankly, we are aspiring in Deloitte. We are retraining and reskilling our finance organization and our finance professionals. And the aim is to do this in collaboration with Workday so that we could proceed together and make the future of finance possible.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. At Workday, we tend to talk about it becoming, from a transaction operator to a strategic advisor, right? Like as a function and how you want to go. How do you think we as Workday are doing on this path? You've been observing us and watching. So how do you feel like we're doing?
Yeah, no, I'll kind of maybe share a perspective, and frankly, I would also like to kind of ask you a question in terms of your own roadmap and sort of the practical use cases. You know, our perspective is this. Workday is absolutely kind of a leader in this space. And when we kind of talk about this space, it's not just about finance. It's not just about AI. It's actually about finance in the age of AI that essentially helps elevate the role of the finance function, helps attain the future of finance, and does it in a manner where organizations are able to meet their North Star or aspirations of becoming an AI-fueled organization. It's finance with AI enabled through Workday, which ultimately is the trifecta that needs to be enabled and needs to be kind of progressed in enterprises.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of how we look at it, we kind of think about it like there's the transaction automation or the business process automation piece. There's the risk mitigation with like anomaly finding. And then there's kind of the insight component where you're going to go get signals or other information that maybe you didn't see before to help you kind of process through that. So as we think about it, I would say on the transaction automation piece, we have really interesting stuff like being able to do contract analysis, either supplier or customer contracts, and being able to compare your policies or the transactions you have against those rules or as it goes and read those contracts. Being able to pull out clauses to do supplier risk mitigation, being able to do OCR for expenses or for supplier invoices to make sure that those are touchless and automated. To your point, building out that reconciliation avatar, right? Like self-reconciling accounts that present themselves to the accountant and say, hey, look, we're reconciled. We did this. You should sign off. Or here's the recommended adjusting entry. You should go.
So, Terrance, another area that Workday is focused on is around company-wide planning. Any thoughts that you could share as it relates to your work in this area, specifically as it relates to your adaptive product?
Yeah, sure. So, maybe it's me personally. We feel like this is going to be a fully transformed business process. And the reason I say that is because planning is an internal function that you can control yourself. And I think what's going to happen here is we're going to see planning move down from high level aggregated sets of data to much more detailed sets of data with lots of hierarchical components to it with a much bigger volume. And we're going to see lots and lots of scenario generations coming automatically from large language models or generative AI to make predictions and look for signals where they come from. So we're kind of embracing this we've implemented already a predictive forecast capability. We're starting to do personal what-if scenarios so that each planner can have their own kind of what-if scenario and then promote that to the main planning function as we go forward. And then because we think it's going to be on large sets of data, we're adding a huge amount of data ingestion capability to the planning solution. And then finally, we're looking at components around conversational planning. So the idea is I can interact with the plan as it as it comes to me and figures out those signals, and I can teach it and help it learn what are good signals and what are bad signals. And I can do that in a way that's a little bit more active than me having to write models. I can do it through a conversational user experience. And we think that will make the planning function run more quickly, run more efficiently, and even help course correct when things go wrong. We don't really believe that a plan needs to be accurate. What we think is the plan needs to be measured, and then you need to have recommendations of how to correct to meet that plan. Planning is one of the business processes that's probably most ripe for transformation in finance as it relates to machine learning. Are you seeing that as well? Do you see AI having a big role in planning?
Yeah, frankly, we're seeing this as part of a closed process. We're seeing this as part of kind of planning. And frankly, some of the use cases that you outlined from a practical perspective gives everyone a roadmap in terms of what to think now, what to enable in the moment, how to take forward. Maybe actually there's another area beyond planning, perhaps in the context of spend management. If you could also kind of share some of your thoughts in terms of how is Workday applying AI and ML in spend management, that'll kind of, let's say, expand the value chain of finance that Workday is enabling for every enterprise out there.
Yeah, so the way that we kind of think about it is, the business processes in finance end up being steeped in business law. And that means you have to do things like create a supplier invoice. No one today would create a supplier invoice. You have a contract or a purchase order, you receive against it, or you check off that you got the services, and then you would pay them. An invoice is used for sales tax or VAT or proof that you owe somebody money. And so that's a business law thing. So what we want to do is take all those compliance components and automate them. So in other words, as you go to contract with somebody, if we give you a set of intelligent clauses or a library of intelligent clauses, and automatically can build a purchase order or contract recommendation for you using generative AI, then you can use that human judgment that you described to actually modify or tweak it as needed, negotiate with your supplier. Now you have a contract in place. Now we can automate the rest of it. The supplier can generate their invoice automatically from their system. I can ingest that. I can automatically create an internal representation of that. I can do my internal coding of accounting or projects or other rules to it. And then I can validate that I can automatically pay for it. So at some point, I am just a supervisor now, not a clerk or an accountant managing that process. That avatar or that process is automated for me almost fully, and I'm just monitoring it. And what that means is we have to change the user experience also around how this works. So everywhere that somebody is interacting with the system today will have a very different interaction. Just like your analogy of the iPhone coming out and the experience it changed for us with our user experience to access different things. I have a camera, I have a flashlight, I can surf the web, I can email someone, I can make a phone call. It's the same concept. I need to change my interface because now I'm not managing a transaction or updating a contract or entering an expense item. What I am doing is managing a process with a lot of things. And I'm going to want to see the results of that process, like the score, like what is my invoice, how much do I owe, et cetera. But I'm also going to want to know how the process is functioning. And so the user experience that I will have will be very different. And to your point about elevating this because it's augmenting me, my job changes because now I am responsible for managing a process, not creating those transactions. And that's, we're well on that path, but that's our vision of where we think we'll end up. Thank you for asking that one. It's pretty good.
Yeah, you actually kind of painted a really, really good picture of what it truly means to be an AI-fueled organization, particularly in the context of finance. Because one of our beliefs is that when we talk about the future of finance that is augmented by and enabled through AI, it will probably be a lot about autonomous finance operations. Autonomous finance operations across the slew and the breadth of use cases that you kind of outlined. And the beauty of it is when a human workforce works with a digital workforce, the digital workforce, as represented perhaps by virtual digital avatars, are actually going to enable those autonomous operations across the breadth of use cases that you outlined, versus our role as a human workforce is exactly where you went. Monitor, assess, judge, govern, be creative, and at the end of the day, help create impact and bring the value, both to kind of protect the downside of an organization, but more so to help grow the revenue of that organization. That's going to be our role.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm sure everybody in finance would like to help the business grow as opposed to be keeping score. So I like that message. So how do people get started with this? Can you give our listeners some, guidance about how to get started with an AI plan and an uptake?
Absolutely. And we actually, Tom and I explored this a bit in the book as well. There's kind of a couple of practical things to consider. One is in the context of data. A lot of what we're talking of, particularly in the finance function, does come down to kind of what data you have, how is it being managed, the way it is being organized, and is it consumable? Is it consumable by all these algorithms? It's not just about the question of having the data and accessing the data. Is it even consumable for these algorithms? So a focus on data is absolutely key. Second, there has to be essentially a scaffolding of trust and governance. Those have to go hand in glove because particularly in the age of generative AI, some of the upside and the opportunities have to be managed considering the underlying risks that we all kind of read about. So a scaffolding of governance and trustworthiness absolutely needs to be implemented. The third element of it is being practical with respect to the use cases. There's a lot of things that can be done. There's a slew of experiments that could be launched, but value is realized when you're practical, you have a view of what use case could bring what particular ROI and how do you measure value. When you do that, you actually have a pathway not only to harness the benefits of artificial intelligence, but do so in a manner where you could grow your business. Those are the three between managing your data, having a scaffolding of governance and trustworthiness, and being practical around the value realization of these use cases and doing it in a systematic manner are the three kind of let's say, dimensions that I would articulate in terms of how and where to get started.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Is there anything around the people? Like, do you have to start preparing people for this journey in any way?
So here's what I would say, and this may be somewhat an unorthodox response. We obviously talk about the degree of retraining, the degree of kind of reskilling, etc., that has to be done. I would actually say this, similar to our kids being smartphone natives, and probably from the time that they kind of start playing around, they know exactly how to navigate through a smartphone and which button to press and how to swipe everything. We will have a workforce that is AI native. We will have a workforce that is AI native where it is intuitive for them. It's less about kind of getting them trained or skilled. What actually is more important is the culture. The culture of that particular enterprise. Culture could be thought of in the context of a system of interactions. And when you are essentially in an environment where you have a system of interactions, to date, those interactions have been with another human being who is a colleague or your friend. Tomorrow, it's going to be both human and digital. Your system of interactions is going to be both with a human and a digital workforce, and how you build your culture, how you manage your culture, and how you bring leadership in that environment is going to be the key.
Yeah, that's not unorthodox. That's just really wise. That's very impressive. Thank you for joining me today, Nitin. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new. It's very exciting. I think it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. All right. So folks, folks, if you're interested in learning more about the latest in finance AI innovation, be sure to register for our complimentary learning certificate series hosted by MIT Sloan Management Review Connections. You can check out the links in the chat to register for that or learn more about Workday and Deloitte solutions in this area. Please comment and let us know which topics you'd like to hear about in our upcoming Workday chats. Have a great day. Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you.